May the words from my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Grace and peace be with you on this day. So, this is almost a cliche for New Year's Eve, to take a look at time. How is time relevant to us as a year has passed and a new year is being ushered in? What is it, the things that we could look at from 2022 that were important, that were things for us to learn from? And what is it that we could look forward to in 2023? So, not too long ago, I read, actually I didn't read, I heard it on NPR, and then later on I had to look it up and read it, that a group of physicists were interviewed and they were asked about time. And these physicists all said, almost in unison, that time is an illusion. That time is something that is a human construct, but it's really not a law of nature. Now, every time I look in the mirror, I beg to differ. But it did get me thinking. And it got me thinking that these physicists have been studying Buddhism for some reason or the other. Because in Buddhism, there is this strong focus on the here and the now, the present moment. This is the moment that matters. And then you may have already heard it said, because it's almost out there, it's common knowledge that the past doesn't matter. It's already passed. Why are you still living in the past? And the future is yet to come, and we don't know what that's going to be, so why are you focusing so much on the future? And a lot of it has to do with our human nature, right? Our past is determining our present. Things that have happened to us or around us is dictating our present moment. And just talk to anybody who slipped on some ice over this cold weather and is limping today. And then, of course, the future is something that we all plan for, and it's also part of our human nature. We want to have a certain amount of control. And so we take a look at the things that are coming up, and let's see if we can plan for them accordingly, get the right people present at the right moment so they could all be there, and maybe we could execute this thing correctly. People who are looking at 2023 because wedding bells are going to ring, or because the cry of a child being born is going to be heard. And there's a lot of things that we plan for. You know, it's the year that young people are graduating from high school or college and so forth. But then there's things that we're not really quite sure how they're going to turn out. And we know it's going to happen. We know it's coming. But how is that going to shake out is a little bit up in the air. And this is where some people start to exhibit some anxiety. They start to exhibit a little bit of uneasiness because we don't know exactly what's going to happen. 2023 is really going to be a year of change for us. 2023 is going to be a year that's going to mark the books. I am praying to sweet Jesus Almighty that is the year that the war in Ukraine ends and that the Russian forces retreat. But we're really not quite sure if that's going to happen. And that is also the year that our senior pastor is going to retreat. He has already announced his retirement. And he's going to be moving into a new stage of life that does not include coming here and being our senior pastor. And that change is going to be significant. That change is going to be significant in the life of this church. How is it that we as a church are going to celebrate his retirement? How is it that we as a church are going to help him move along? And at the same time, how is it that we're going to take a look at tomorrow with hopeful eyes and take a look at the church that we need to be? And the thing about the scriptures today is that they fall very easily into the message that I'm giving you. From Ecclesiastes, we have that there is a time for everything and a purpose for There's a season for every purpose under heaven. And so the author of Ecclesiastes goes through all the different categories of things that happen in life and that have happened in our own life. And you don't have to live very long to see the common sense behind it. And then I paired it up with the passage from Elijah because God is asking a very, very important question. That was, according to the scriptures, asked of Elijah, but that I believe is asked of us on a daily basis. What are we doing here? Just what exactly are we doing here? Now let me give you a little bit of context for those of you who are not familiar with either passage. The book of Ecclesiastes falls under a category of books called wisdom literature. Wisdom literature is the book of Proverbs, the book of Lamentations, the book of Ecclesiastes, and it's basically written by a group of scholarly and wise Jewish people that are speaking to somebody much younger, and they address that person, and they address that person as my son, let me guide you in the ways of life, type of thing. And you see that throughout the literature. And that wise person is telling the younger person, these are the things that are important about living our life today. And then in the book of Kings, you have the chronicles or the narration of how Israel and Judea came to being, how the Jewish people moved from being a tribe to being a nation, and a nation with a king. But they also had prophets, and the prophet was very, very present in the life of the Jewish people. And Elijah in particular was a significant prophet. He's given the very important attribute of saving Judaism from extinction. Believe it or not, Judaism almost did not survive. And so let me give you some of that history. They were a minority religion. And what was the dominant religion of the day in that region? Worshippers of Baal. B-A''A'-L. And those that worship Baal were pretty much nature worshipers that attributed to nature many divine attributes. And they had a lot of rituals that do not coincide with our Judeo-Christian traditions. One of them being human sacrifice. They would sacrifice humans to the god of Baal. And then, of course, there was a lot of sexual rituals as well, too. And they were the dominant religion of the time, and they saw the Jewish people as a group of people that needed to be removed, wiped out. And Elijah faced the leader of that worshiping group of Baal, a woman by the name of Jezebel. Does that name ring a bell? Right? And usually that name does not bring about a good connotation. And that's because Jezebel had decided that Elijah needed to be killed. And she put a price on his head, and she said, "We want him dead." And so Elijah, after defeating her army and pretty much single-handedly killing hundreds, if not thousands, of that invading and occupying army, and therefore saving Judaism, he, for some reason, after such a victory, felt fear in his heart. And he went and he hid in the cave of a mountain. Now, what we know about fear, and you've heard me preach this before, and as well as Pastor Keith, that fear is the exact opposite of faith. If faith were to have a villain that would fight it, it is fear. And so for this great prophet to have fear in his heart kind of, speaks to his human nature and to the humanity of it all. But at the same time, kind of makes you wonder, what's going on there? But here we get this beautiful, beautiful story full of metaphors of how it is that Elijah found God. Where exactly did he find God? And he found God in the gentle whisper. And what is it exactly that that gentle whisper said to him? And that was pretty much an existential question. What are you doing here? And so as pastors living 4,000 years later, 4,000 years after the time of Elijah, more or less, give or take a few centuries, that question is still important for us. Just what is it that we're doing? And what is it that we're doing here? I happen to know that there are people not in worship with us today because they wanted to go to the Bucks game. I know there are people not here today because it's a little foggy outside, it's a little misty, and they don't want to deal with the weather. But I also happen to know that there are people who are not here today because this church or this faith is not cutting it for them, not really meeting their needs. And this is something that as a pastor I have to take seriously. How do I compete with the Bucks? How do I compete with the weather? And how do I compete with somebody's lack of faith? And it is not only a challenge for me as a pastor, but it's a challenge for the church. Because the church is not the pastor. The church is the people. And this is the people's church. We need to keep that in mind. We need to keep that in mind, especially as we're facing a year of change. This is not Keith's church. This is not Guillermo's church. This is your church. This is our church. I'm going to put myself in there with you because when I came in, I said that I would walk with you in this journey of faith that we have. And so this problem that we have, or this challenge, if I want to put it nicely, is a challenge that each and every one of us must face. And what is it that we're doing here? Sometimes it's very personal. We're here for our own personal reasons, for our own healing, for our own journey. We have a question that somehow or another needs to be answered, and we hope it will be answered here today. But then there's a communal reason. As a community, we gather here, and then that purpose changes. What might be true for the individual may not necessarily be true for the whole group. And I will pose this moment that this question is not for me to answer. What are we doing here? It's not a question for me to answer. And some of you might be surprised to hear me say that, because you might be used to a pastor that's always telling you what to do. You might be used to a pastor that's always giving you the answer. Whereas I'm going to say, let's take a look at the question together. Let's struggle with it together. And your answer might be different from mine. And possibly as a community, we can come up with a variety of answers that are good for the community as well. Because we know that some people in the community are here because of what happened in Fort Myers and the hurricane that blew through, and they think it's important that the church be part of the rebuilding. And we know that some people are here because they think it's important for the church to evangelize and go out there and bring in new souls to Jesus. And we know that for some other people, it's important for the church to have a presence in the community because the community is struggling with a lot of social, political issues, and we lay down the values that are needed for those decisions on a whole. And I can go on and on and on. What are we doing here today? Pass-A-Grille Beach Community Church, United Church of Christ. Where we always like to say, no matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are welcomed here.